You have reached the deepest depths of the internet. If it is greatness you seek, you've come to the wrong show. If it's about not wasting time, don't worry, you're never going to get your time back. If it's knowledge you seek, just be aware, any knowledge gained here is going to be minuscule. So now it's time for Accost the Field with Tony Gerdeman on the Ozone Radio Network. All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Accost the Field. I am Tony Gerdeman here tonight with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
It's going great, Tony. I appreciated you telling everyone that I was going to ruin Santa Claus for Buckeye fans, or Buckeye Santa Claus or whatever earlier today on Twitter. That was nice to always good to ingratiate myself with the whole Ohio State fan base.
Yep, Tom's running a series now on basically myth-busting Ohio State lore. And everything you've told your kids about Ohio State, Tom was like, And so, yeah, you're pretty much the worst person in the world.
I am the turd in your Buckeye Punch Bowl this summer. But I was interested in finding out whether this stuff was actually true or not. So hopefully someone else is too.
And what is what's coming tomorrow or today or Wednesday?
So Tuesday I did the blue and yellow kind of tiles in the north rotunda of the stadium. Was that a result of a bet with Michigan? And the answer is almost certainly not. I found a document in the Ohio State archives that said those were approved by the Board of Trustees and the Stadium Planning Board more than a year before the first game, and the legend is that was a result of a bet on the first game in Ohio Stadium history. Not the first game, but the dedication game in 1922. The tiles were approved in 1921, so that obviously is not true. That was not the origin of those. Wednesday, it is the story about Woody Hayes in 1968, going for two at the end of the Michigan game, already up 50-14, and then in the post-game interview saying he went for two, but only because they wouldn't let him go for three. So I don't want to spoil that for anyone, but I may ruin some beloved Buckeye traditions this week. I'm sorry. I personally own the "They Wouldn't Let Me Go for Three" T-shirt from Homage, so it hits close to home for me too. So
it's a T-shirt of lies.
It is. I live in a house of lies with some gravy stains on it. Yes.
So before we get too far into the show, Shannon is not here today. That's why you won't hear him. And Tom, we don't have any more all or nothing to go over this week. So that will help us get to our time limit of, usually we shoot for an hour. We have not done well with that mark over the last, 35 shows. So today we have to hit an hour. And so I've set a timer for an hour, and once that goes off, we're done, because we are also going to record another show after that for our vacation shows in July, which will be stuff like, favorite Ohio State football game memories, favorite Michigan game memories, stuff like that, stuff that we can go ahead and put out there for everybody, just conversational memories and thoughts and, all that good stuff. So that's what we've got coming. And now that I say, my fear in always doing this and putting a show together is that, I'll have this rundown and we'll get about 37 minutes into the show and we're like almost done. And so now that I've said an hour, we'll probably, maybe get like 46 minutes, and then there'll be like 13 minutes of dead silence. And then the alarm on my phone will go off, and that'll be the end of the show, if that's okay with you.
That'll work great. Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to lie. I'm not all that worried about us going short. That has not typically been our issue on this show. So I have this sneaking suspicion that even without John O'Corn this week, we will probably make it to a full hour.
And I also, last week's show went 2 hours. I cut a whole bunch of Nick Saban stuff. And then we also rushed through the end of just questions. So last week could have really gone way long, but it gets late. It gets late. I get tired. You get tired. The listeners don't get tired, especially now that I'm using a microphone. So that's pretty cool.
The nice thing about podcasts is when we go just painfully long, you can always listen at 1.5 speed and you can still understand us, but we go way faster and the shows go way faster. So it's a little, that's how I listen to every podcast, and you blast through stuff so much more efficiently. So that's a little pro tip. And then we both speak at a pace that's like, oh, they're speaking and it's very energetic, as opposed to normally when we're just kind of going, yes. So little pro tip for all of you out there.
Like if you were to go back and look at the Facebook Live from the Iowa game last year, maybe put that on 1.5 speed. Because then the stunned silence doesn't last as long.
Don't do that. Free advice, don't do that.
I'm thinking back, 37-minute show or 60-minute show or whatever. We would do those Facebook Lives after the game with an intention, let's at least get 15, minutes, and then we'd be done and we'd be like, well, how long was that? And it'd be like 45 minutes. I think one time it was like 50. And meanwhile, everybody else is up in the press box, doing content, and we're still down on the field. So this past week, what has happened? Basically, recruiting stuff. I think the big news was the commitment of center Harry Miller. But before that, it was quarterback Grant Gunnell, I'm going to call him. The Texas quarterback committing to Arizona, which now leaves Ohio State further scrambling, but they were already they'd already begun scrambling procedures before that commitment, because I guess the writing was on the wall for that, and one of the things that came out of that is he had said that he liked Arizona because of their laid back atmosphere. And Tom, a quarterback saying that they preferred a laid-back atmosphere or just preferring a laid-back atmosphere, that is going to make Urban Meyer and Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson run very, very far away very, very quickly.
Yeah, if you're looking for a laid-back atmosphere, Ohio State is definitely not going to be a great fit for you culturally. There are a lot of words you could use to describe the Ohio State football program and everything that goes on in the Woody Hayes Center, and laid back would not be one of the terms I would use. I think if you go down the list of the top 10 programs in the country, laid back is not something you would probably use to describe, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State, Penn State. I mean, you could go pretty far down the list before you got to a coach or an atmosphere that I would guess you might be able to describe as laid back. Laid back is the kind of attitude that gets you in the Foster Farms Bowl. So that that's a thing you can do. So yeah, Grant Gunnell looked like he might be headed to Ohio State after he decommitted from Texas A&M earlier this year, and he was trending strongly towards them, and then just kind of started drifting away. And you never quite know if that's the player has sort of started losing interest in the program, or the program has, started looking at some other guys to see if other people might be a better fit and started drifting away from the player. But yeah, the writing has been on the wall with him for a little while that it was probably not going to happen.
And sometimes when players choose other schools, you have the fan base, be it Ohio State or any other fan base, saying, well, we dodged a bullet there. But in an instance where a quarterback is looking for something that is more laid back, more relaxed, and you think of JT Barrett, and we talked about this with Michigan last week, about the lack of leaders. JT Barrett is maybe one of the most relaxed guys you'll ever see at interviews. But then when you see the behind-the-scenes stuff, there's nothing relaxed about him. And if you're looking for a laid-back environment, yeah, you can find him out west, that's for sure. And you look at how Kevin Sumlin has gone through quarterbacks over the years, and some guys, for a while there, they were all leaving Texas A&M like one after another. They wouldn't even be there for more than a year before they were transferring out. And I don't know why, if it's, sometimes is it too relaxing? Is it not demanding enough? Were they not maybe getting the development that they needed, or, I don't know why everybody was leaving. But it'll be interesting to see if things are copacetic there. If you're looking for a relaxed environment, you can do worse than Arizona, out there just chilling. So,
that's going to be an interesting quarterback room, because Khalil Tate, who's their starter, who was amazing last year, when there were rumors that they were pretty close to hiring Ken Niumatalolo from Navy, he tweeted something and deleted it pretty soon after, but it was basically, I didn't come here to run the triple option, which, is kind of stupid, because you're basically running the triple option. You're just not running it out of the flex bone like Navy does. That's basically the option offense they run right now anyway. But so, and then he tweeted that, and then all of a sudden it wasn't going to be Niumatalolo, and they sort of backed off of that. So, I can't imagine. First of all, I can't imagine an Ohio State player during some coaching search tweeting something like disapproving of the guy who's about ready to be the next head coach. But I especially can't imagine that potentially impacting who the actual coach was. That if the quarterback is having some kind of a say in who the next coach is, that's that can go one of two ways, and if it doesn't go the good way, it can go real bad real quickly. So that'll be a very interesting quarterback room to watch the next couple of years.
You don't remember when in like November of 2011, Braxton Miller tweeted out "Urban who"? That was a big controversy back then.
Yeah, I do remember in 2000 and in like 2000 to 2001 when John Cooper was fired, a lot of the players on those teams really wanted Ohio State to hire Fred Puggich, who was the incumbent defensive coordinator, which, if you look at what happened with Fred Puggich and his career after that, I don't think that was based on merit so much as inertia. So, maybe it's not always a great idea to let players decide who your next coach should or shouldn't be.
Or students, because I was thinking just now while you were talking, I was thinking when I was a student in the mid to late 90s, it was like, Fred Puggich will eventually take over for Cooper, and then Chris Spielman will be the head coach in waiting, and we'll let Puggich have it for like 2 or 3 years, but then it's Spielman for the next 30 or 40, and that's why you don't let idiot 18, 19-year-olds make decisions.
I was the sports editor of The Lantern in John Cooper's last season in 2000, and I wrote a column that I still would absolutely stand up for, about why it was probably time to fire Cooper, and I think it was pretty well reasoned, and I think it probably time bore out that was probably the right decision at the right time. But then the following week or whatever, I wrote a column about how the next head coach should be Chris Spielman. So, batting 500 will get you in the Hall of Fame. So, if I had the courage to stick to my guns and just insist for the next 18 years that it really should have been Chris Spielman, I could have gotten a show on FS1. But I didn't do that, and I chose another path, and that's okay.
But then in 2011, in May of 2011, when Tressel gets fired, you can like repost that and be like, see,
we should have hired Spielman after all. See.
But it sounds crazy. It sounds stupid now. It sounds very stupid now, Tom. Very stupid. But at the time, that was a popular want. It was a popular desire, and it had been brewing for years because Chris Spielman was going to get into coaching. Was he coaching the Destroyers at that time?
No, this was well before the Destroyers. He coached the Destroyers. That was in the late 2000, like the decade of the 2000s. So 2007 or 2008, something like that. And if you don't remember, I am almost positive. I do not have any sort of vintage AFL website open in front of me, but I am almost positive that the Columbus Destroyers went 0 in the 1 year that he coached them in the AFL.
That is my memory as well.
Yeah.
Those poor Columbus destroyers. And I think he still had his radio show in Columbus and would do some venting here and there. But yeah, I mean, I think history will probably show that Andy Geiger didn't do too bad with the Jim Tressel hire. Might be too soon to judge, but
settle down, Gerd. Enough with the hot takes.
So, yeah, and we're worried about an hour show. We've just been talking about Jim Tressel after the Arizona quarterback situation. So that, that without Cannell in the crosshairs, they turn to they've got three guys sort of that they've offered pro style guys that they're all committed in Ryan Helinski out of California, committed to South Carolina, the number 2 pro style passer. Dwan Mathis out of Michigan, committed to Michigan State, has been committed to them for a while now. He's the number 10 pro style passer. Graham Mertz, the number 4 pro style passer out of Kansas, has been committed to Wisconsin for a while. And Graham Mertz, Tom, is probably like the hottest quarterback on the market right now. I shouldn't say on the market, but everybody's impressed with him wherever he goes, all these camps and stuff. And Helinski's not too far behind him, but I think the staff will go in, or has gone in, maybe all in on Mertz. But he just came back from an official visit to Wisconsin, and right now it doesn't look good for Ohio State. He's saying all the right things. He doesn't think he's going to take any other visits. And so those three guys, I don't know, Tom, do you think that Mertz is a flip candidate?
He's certainly a flip candidate, but you have to get him on campus. He has to come for an official visit. He is, the question you have is yes/no, do the Buckeyes land him? And the answer right now is no, but the second he sets foot on campus, I flip that answer to yes. Because if he is even remotely open to the possibility of flipping to the point where he comes to Ohio State for an official visit, then I think at some point Ohio State's able to, wave the rings in front of him and show him Wisconsin is a very good football program. Wisconsin has been playing at a top 10 or so level for several years now. They will continue to play at a top 10 or so level, and if that's what you want, that's fine. But there's also a level above that, and that's where we are. And that is a sales pitch that they have, I think, used to flip a number of people in the past. And this would certainly not be the first quarterback commit that they flipped. They flipped Dwayne Haskins from Maryland. That's that's one recent example. But I think that if they can get him on campus, they can get him to commit. But you've got to get him on campus. He visited Ohio State kind of very briefly while he was in town for a camp, beginning of April, probably, I think. But yeah, they have not. They have to get him back. They have to bring him back. If they do bring him back, they've got a chance.
At this point, I feel like Mathis might be the better chance, just because I have no idea why. Really, like Mertz is saying all of the right stuff for Wisconsin. Mathis maybe isn't as, I don't know, vociferous in his dedication to Michigan State, but he's shown no indication that he's not. And, with those three guys, if they can't get any of them, there's a couple of other guys that they're looking at. Now, Urban Meyer said back in the spring, I believe, that it's a terrible year for quarterbacks in 2019. And he's not the only person to say that. Recruiting analysts have said that as well. And you look at past years, there'd be quarterbacks littering, the top 10, top 20. I don't think any of these guys are in there. There's some dual threat guys that have maybe not been as involved with Ohio State after Ohio State offered, or maybe they're, I don't know if they're distancing themselves or what, and they've sort of zeroed in on these three guys, or more guys to come. One of them would be the Brian Maurer out of Florida, number 19 pro style passer. I believe he's going to the Elite 11 finals. He lit it up there, or in the regionals. and he's got offers from Texas A&M, West Virginia, Boston College. We'll see if Ohio State now moves to him. But then, Tom, there's the guy that will maybe end up with an offer by default is Connor, I will say, Bazalek, who is Ohio's top quarterback from Kettering Alter, who is the number 20 pro-style passer. He's got offers from Indiana and Kentucky and Missouri and Pitt, and Georgia's on there as well. But that to me feels like an offer to come camp, and then we'll see what happens. But there's no offer there from Ohio State. I feel like, Tom, they're just going to do what they can to try to get Mertz or Mathis, and then they feel like they can always keep this Ohio kid waiting. And if they have to come back to him in January or whatever, they will. But they're going to put all of their eggs in other baskets for now.
Right. And I think that they know they have to get someone. They have to get a quarterback. And I know that Urban doesn't Urban doesn't ever want to reach. He doesn't want to take a guy just to have a warm body. And you're probably not doing that in this case. This is, you said he's a 20th ranked pro style quarterback in the country, 21st ranked player in Ohio this year. The guys all around him on the pro style quarterback list are committed to Power 5 programs. This is not a guy who's ranked in the area where it's like, oh, and the guy ahead of him is going to Eastern Michigan. The guy right behind him is committed to USC. So, I mean, if the 21st ranked pro style quarterback is going to USC, which is a school that's pretty renowned for its quarterbacks, then the 20th ranked pro style quarterback is probably an okay prospect. That's not, it's not some insane reach where you're taking some guy and stealing him away from Eastern Illinois or something like that. The guys behind him on the list in Ohio are going to Michigan State, Michigan, TCU. I mean, this is a reasonably good class in Ohio in 2019. This is not littered with the kind of players that Ohio State has been taking. Ohio State's been extremely selective about the players they've been taking, and it's been, basically the top 200 and then in the nation, and then, you basically fill most of your class from there. So he's not at that level, but he's by all means, he seems like a very legitimate Power 5 conference prospect. And when you're looking at a quarterback room of Dwayne Haskins in 2019, of Dwayne Haskins, if he doesn't leave, which he theoretically could, and Tate Martell and Matthew Baldwin, you're looking at 2 or 3 scholarship quarterbacks in 2019. So you have to take someone this year. So he does seem like the kind of guy they can kind of slow play for a little bit if they like Mertz better or they like Mathis better. Like you said, it certainly seems that they are kind of pushing all in on Mertz right now. If they can get him on campus, great, and then maybe they have a chance to flip him. If not, you can always go back to, I'll say Bazalek, but
I was going to say you keep calling him he. I wanted an official pronunciation. Yeah.
I'll say Connor Bazalek. It's Bazelak, I believe. So, you can go back to him hopefully in November or December if Mertz doesn't flip, if Mathis doesn't flip, and you keep talking to him, you keep your options open. Right now his crystal ball I think was only a couple votes, and it was to Kentucky. Mm-hmm. You can get a kid back from Kentucky. You can get an Ohio kid back from Kentucky. That's not a school that Ohio State's going to lose a lot of recruiting battles to. So, yeah, I think they'll kind of keep their options open, and they will end up with someone in this class. It will, whether it's one of these names we've talked about or not, they will end up with someone playing quarterback in this class.
Do you think? I don't think it would be crazy to maybe, if they can get somebody else, that's great. But then you come back to how are we saying it? Bazalek?
We're just going to call him Connor. We can say Bazalek.
How about Seabaz?
Yep.
I think they maybe do they come back to him and get him in the February signing period, or as a second quarterback, just as insurance. But if it's not a great class, do you take 2 to make sure to increase your chances to get a good one? Or why would you take 2 from a bad class? So I'm interested to see how they move forward with that. If you're not going to get a great one, do you want two guys who might be good, or do you just get one and you hope for the best, but know that we like what we got in 2017, we like what we got in 2018, 2020 looks pretty good, 2021 there will be somebody else. And yeah, no, you don't want to reach or whatever, but you still do need that warm body, because we've seen what happens with injuries, and Urban Meyer is the guy who always says Ohio kids develop later. So this is an opportunity to see maybe if that happens with this guy, and if not, then they process him. I mean, that's just the way it is.
I really doubt, based on the way they recruit and not taking guys that they don't think can play at that level, I really doubt they would take two quarterbacks in this class. I think at this point, it sounds like they're pretty comfortable with the 2020 class. I mean, you've got Jack Miller, who's an extremely highly rated quarterback out of Arizona, who has been very, very high on Ohio State, who has visited Ohio State, I think, a couple times now. I feel like we've seen him a couple times before games. And he is, I think they have to feel pretty good about him. You really need a body in that quarterback room for the 2019 season, and then, for the next year after that. And then you see how he develops, like you said. I mean, having a quarterback who is a competent, solid backup, you need a couple of those guys. You cannot, because you don't want to get into the position Michigan was in last year, where it's like, okay, we went through our first quarterback, and then we went through our second quarterback, and now we're on our third quarterback, and we really don't have, they really did not have three quarterbacks who could play at the level that they needed to. Ohio State needs to have three quarterbacks that can play at that level, because, I mean, as we saw in 2014, sometimes you get down to your third quarterback, and Ohio State does not want to have a year where they have to basically punt an entire season because you have two healthy quarterbacks, and okay, they both got hurt, and now the third guy's a walk-on. That's not going to go over real well if Ohio State has to basically punt a season because they ran out of healthy scholarship quarterbacks.
One of the positions that will be trying to protect the quarterback is the offensive line and center. And center is where Ohio State got the good news this week with the commitment of Harry Miller, who is the number 2 center in the 24/7 composite, I believe the 37 player overall. ESPN, however, has him as the number 1 center and the number 20 player overall out of Buford, Georgia. And this was coming for a while, and he had been planning to do it in Central America, but that trip got canceled basically. So he just went ahead and, I've committed to Ohio State, and to nobody's surprise. And it's the second year in a row Ohio State got their top center target. Last year it was Matthew Jones. This year, I guess, was Matthew Jones. 2019, it's Harry Miller. And the interesting thing for me, Tom, is you've got those two guys, and yet Josh Myers has a chance to win the center job this year. And if he does, you would assume he'd be a 4-year starter unless he goes pro early. So I think it's impressive that they're still able to land these guys. And even though neither of them have committed while Josh Myers was a starting center, but to get two guys like that, and to also possibly have a guy who is just getting his center career started, I think it bodes well for the future of the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, that's a position you absolutely want to have depth at. But the nice thing about center is it's not generally hard to move a guy from center to guard. Guard to center sometimes is a tricky proposition because, you obviously have the additional responsibility of actually snapping the ball and a lot of times making the line calls and that kind of stuff. Moving from center to guard is not necessarily a difficult thing to do. You think about, Billy Price went guard to center eventually. They could start these guys at guard if Josh Myers is starting at center, and then move them to center when there's a spot open at center. And, you got to remember, Miller is coming in not this year, but next year. So he comes in 2019. almost every offensive lineman redshirts as a freshman. So he redshirts in 2019. He's a backup in 2020, and then maybe he starts at guard in 2021, and then he would have 2 years where he could move to center if Matthew Jones isn't playing center. I mean, you've got some options there. You're not, this isn't quarterback where you're really just going to play one and everyone else is going to sit. He's got a little time to develop to get his, kind of get his game together and be ready to play. Although he certainly on film looks physically impressive and, mentally is clearly ready for this kind of level. But he's got a little bit of time to, grow and mature a little more and learn the system and all that kind of stuff, and then be put in a position to succeed when he does get on the field.
And he's the third offensive lineman committed to Ohio State in the 2019 class. He joins Ryan Jacoby and Doug Nestor. And I believe both, I know Nestor is, I'm not sure if Jacoby is considered a tackle, but I'm not sure if Ohio State considers them tackles. So it will be interesting to see if those three become the interior of the class and they still go out and search for other tackles. They've still got Jonathan Allen at Dayton Dunbar, who everybody assumes will be a Buckeye. It's going to be a big class. I think what we talked about before, maybe 5 or 6 guys from the offensive line in this class. And if you've already got 3 and go ahead.
We talked about 5 or 6, and it certainly seems like they're trending that way right now.
Because they've already got 3 in the fold. You assume 4 with Allen, and then you've got how many months until signing day? And just look at how late they got Nick Petit-Frere last year. That was February, wasn't it? So you'll get these guys locked in, and then maybe go get another one between now and January. And are they in on a super big fish at the end, and do they get that guy? So yeah, the offensive line looks like it's going pretty well for the Buckeyes in 2019, which shouldn't be a surprise. Now, Tom, we don't have all or nothing to talk about, but we should still talk Michigan football. And something that Nick Baumgartner, who works for the Detroit Free Press, covers the Wolverines there. He was tweeting about Jim Harbaugh's podcast, and I was thinking first I'm jealous that there's a coach who does a podcast. Like I don't know, does he do one every week? Do you know?
I don't know. I honestly have never listened to it.
Neither have I. I couldn't imagine, and I say I'm jealous. I could not imagine listening to a Jim Harbaugh podcast. But to be able to get information, weekly from a coach would be pretty cool. But then you'd have to cover it and listen to it, and listen to Jim Harbaugh read sponsor, commercials. I don't know, hey, don't forget AutoZone. If your battery running low, go to AutoZone, and then maybe repeat a jingle or something. I guess I would listen to that.
The Jim Harbaugh podcast, sponsored by Milk.
Any particular dairy? No, just the Milk Bureau. Big Milk has sponsored this show. So anyway, Nick tweeted out some stuff from Jim Harbaugh's podcast, and basically Harbaugh said there's 20 to 30 walk-ons who are quote unquote knocking on the door for playing time or have impressed him. And then he'd mentioned the roster of the 110 roster, saying that they've posted the roster, and so everybody knows who's on the 110. And there are scholarship players who aren't in the 110, and there are walk-ons who are, and preferred walk-ons who are, and just tryout guys who are on the 110, and scholarship players are not. Some scholarship players are not on there. Now, to me, this is a pretty clear motivational tool to get the guys that you want to light a fire under, get their seats warm, just to get them working harder. But this is also a situation at running back where Jim Harbaugh has been adamant that walk-on True Wilson is the number 3 running back. And True Wilson was a 2-star safety in the 2016 class with offers from the military, the service academies, and I think Robert Morris, maybe. So that's who their number 3 running back is right now. Now, they still have the freshman coming in. But all of this talk about walk-ons, Tom, I think some of it obviously is motivational. But if your scholarship players are not, if they've been passed by 25 other people, that's very bad news.
Yeah, I think that's probably about 75 or 80% motivational, light a fire under people, like you said. But whatever degree to which that's true, that is pretty concerning. I mean, to be down to a walk-on as your third best running back, that's a problem. That is a pretty significant failure in recruiting. I mean, we talked about Kareem Walker last week. He left. He transferred out. The former Ohio State commit who then flipped to Michigan. So he's gone now. He didn't pan out. I mean, they've got Karan Higdon. They've got Chris Evans. But behind that, it is pretty bleak in that running back room. And it's been that way for a while. I mean, last year they had Walker there. They had Ty Isaac there, the transfer from USC. But they have not developed running backs there. And they've had depth problems at a bunch of different positions. We've talked about this a whole bunch of times where, that some of the top line talent at Michigan, the Rashawn Garys, they're and some of the guys like that, Devin Bush, Chase Winovich, those guys are, as good as the Ohio State, their Ohio State counterparts, or at least would certainly be in the same discussion with some of their Ohio State counterparts. But the pool's pretty shallow there. You get past it, Rashad Gary at defensive end, and the second string there is not what the second string at Ohio State is, and that's just a function of recruiting. And they have not recruited. The top of their class in some years has been kind of as good or close to as good as Ohio State, but it has fallen off pretty quickly. They'll get 3 or 4 pretty good players, and then it'll fall off pretty quickly, and that adds up. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing there. When he says that, I think that he is trying to light a fire under guys, but he may be trying to light a fire under guys who might just not be good enough to play at the level that they want to play at.
And the thing is, the recruiting, I don't know that it's getting better, because you look at the 2018 class, and if you look like the 24/7 rankings of where those players rank, before too long, you're in the 100s, 200s, 500s, 600s, 700s. And that's not Michigan recruiting. You look at Ohio State's recruiting, which right now we shouldn't compare it to Michigan, but you have to go, 9 or 10 guys before you get out of the hundreds, or before you get out of the double digits. And then way at the bottom, that's when they're maybe extending offers to players at the end, or that's where they see a guy that they like a Malik Hooker, or Marcus Hooker rather. And it's very at the very bottom of their class where you start to see these large hundreds, rankings. But Michigan, it happens much sooner. And I remember when Rich Rod got to Michigan, he was recruiting very similarly, where he was competing against Purdue, USF, although back then USF was probably pretty good, but he wasn't recruiting against schools that Michigan normally recruits against. And we're seeing the same thing with a lot of Michigan's commits, and it's not going to get better, because your chances of finding starters, rankings aren't the end all, whatever, but your chances of hitting guys is better higher up than in the 700s, 800s, 600s, 500s. And if that continues, then you're going to build up a great walk-on program, because you're going to have to find talent somewhere. And it's not the way to compete with Ohio State and Penn State and even Michigan State right now.
Right. I mean, I think that I tweeted this at the time, and I think the number was something like 14. If you just mixed Ohio State's class and Michigan's class in the 2018 recruiting cycle, 14 of the top 15 ranked players were Ohio State. So 14-1 in the top 15 players. And the thing that I think was tough for them last cycle was they were in on some good guys earlier in the cycle. I mean, they had Otis, I think it was Otis Reese was his name, a linebacker from Georgia. They had him committed the whole cycle. He was a top 100 guy. I think he was ranked around 70th or something in the country at all players. And then he flipped to Georgia on signing day. And they lost out on some guys. They just weren't in on a bunch of guys. I mean, think about how infrequently players come down to an Ohio State-Michigan recruiting battle now. That used to be all the time. It was Ohio State versus Michigan for the top players in Ohio or the top players in the Midwest. Now it's Ohio State versus Notre Dame when it's kids from, Cincinnati and that area. It's Ohio State against Alabama or Clemson or, other national programs when it's kids from elsewhere. It's almost never Ohio State, Michigan. They're not recruiting the same players. And it's not that, it's a stylistic choice that Michigan is intentionally recruiting different players. They're just not recruiting at the same level. And that, people always point at, AJ Hawk was only a 3-star and Mike DeAndrea was a 5-star, and therefore recruiting rankings don't matter. Mm-hmm. But there is a real strong correlation between how well you recruit and how well you play on the field on the whole. And if you go back and look at the teams that have won national championships and made the college football playoffs, they're all teams that are recruiting top 10 classes, if not every year, then at least most years. And Michigan is off to a good start again this year, but they were off to a good start last year, and then it imploded. So, they have a 5-star kid from Georgia, I think, at the top of their class right now.
Right.
But if they go 8-4 again, and people are screaming about Harbaugh not being there, is he going to stay? He's from Georgia. Does he have ties to Michigan that are so deep and strong that, an in-state program like Georgia can't pull him away? I don't know. Maybe. But they are getting to the point where they are pretty desperate to have a good recruiting class this year because you are getting to the point where, if you have 2 or 3 kind of lousy classes in a row, then you're just a bad program, and then it's even harder to dig out from under that.
Yeah, and Michigan has always been a national program, and when you have struggles, then that national name drops. Now, we talked a couple weeks ago or whatever, last week, about Miami, and now that name dropped, but there's enough local talent to keep it buoyed. And that's not the case in Michigan, and of course right now they're not even getting the local kids. But it's almost like Michigan isn't even trying as hard as they could or as they should, or certainly not as hard as Ohio State and Penn State. And like Jim Tressel used to say that if you skip a couple days in recruiting, it's like skipping a couple days shaving. You look terrible or whatever. And that's what we're seeing with Michigan now. He went with and the crazy thing is they work so hard with these satellite camps. That had to be exhausting to do that with the assistant coaches and going everywhere and seeing everybody for, like 3 weeks at a time, just being gone. But it got them nothing. And the commits that it did get them, they didn't end up being good enough to become Wolverines. And so the energy isn't being put in the right places, I don't think. Urban Meyer talks about he loves to recruit. He loves to, talk to the players and sell Ohio State or sell Florida or sell Bowling Green. He just loves the process. And I think Jim Harbaugh loves everything about football, and I think he's even loves recruiting. But Tom, I think the energy is sometimes put in the wrong places, like sleeping over for a kicker. I think his time could be managed better.
I mean, we talked about that with the last episode of All or Nothing. They showed him putting up decals in the Schembechler Center or Schembechler Hall. And it's like, this is not what they're paying you money for. You're making $7 million a year. There is something else you can be doing with your time right now. I mean, that's obviously maybe staged for the cameras, but it's also, maybe a sort of microcosm of a bigger issue. Whatever they're doing is not working. They have, some of it may be the assistant coaches they bring in. I mean, Urban Meyer brings in coaches, and the first question is, can this guy recruit? That is the first question. If you can't recruit, you can't coach at Ohio State. Michigan has brought in guys. I think it's Chris Partridge, who is a former New Jersey high school coach. I think he coached Paramus Catholic before he came to Michigan. And then lo and behold, Jabril Peppers and Rashawn Gary both came from Paramus Catholic to Michigan. And, they had established a pretty decent pipeline into New Jersey for a few years. Some of those guys have worked out and some of them haven't. But, he's someone who is the type of person that, you could see Ohio State putting on a recruiting staff. There are guys there, I don't know how Tim Drevno was as a recruiter. I don't know how Pep Hamilton is as a recruiter, but whatever they're doing right now isn't working. And I don't know if that's a function of the people they have there or what they're selling. Because it's, as we've talked about, you're now selling a program that has not been good in the memories of the people that you're selling it to. All these kids who are high school juniors and seniors right now, all they can remember is Michigan being crap. They have not been, they had the one Sugar Bowl year with Brady Hoke where they just kind of fluked their way into a Sugar Bowl, and that's it. Michigan has been completely irrelevant basically every other season that these kids can remember. So that's, that's a hard sell.
And we've both said that All or Nothing was not a positive recruiting tool. And you look at just the demeanor of the program and you wonder how could recruits be excited to be a part of it. And I guess the answer is that a lot of them have no desire to be a part of it. But then, like we talked about with Gunnell, you just have to find the place that suits you. If one place is too demanding or too, I don't know, just too hyper, you find somewhere else that you can fit into. And maybe Michigan, I think it would be a problem if they're finding the players that fit into this emotionless void of Michigan football where, we're bringing in more people who are just like us. And where's the diversity? We always talk about, where are the leaderships? Where are the yellers? And where are the guys who fire everybody up? And where are the leaders who just raise everybody up? And instead you've got more, like automatons, or they're not even emotionless. I don't know. It's, if you watch All or Nothing, you'll see there's not a strong picture painted of the program of development or the lack of energy, the lack of fun that people are having. I think that's the thing, Tom, that I'm still stuck with from that show is how miserable everybody looks.
Yeah, they clearly thought that show was going to be a wonderful recruiting tool, and I think it turned into exactly the opposite. That's I think almost inarguable if you watch that show. And what are you going to do if you lose your last 3 games of the year? Yeah, it's gonna look like a real bummer at the end of the year. There's nothing much you can do about that. Try not losing your last 3 games of the year next time. That's about the best thing you can do. Speaking of things that didn't turn out the way that we thought they would. Remember when you were worried we were going to go 42 minutes and not, be done with questions? We're now at about 48 minutes and haven't started questions yet. So, do you want to fire through those rapid fire, or do you want to keep slagging on Michigan for another 12 minutes?
Well, I was thinking we would just go to the very last question, which is from @JackStraw1972, and we'll see how long this lasts. And if we have to, we'll answer another question after this if we need to. But I'd like to hear you and Tom Orr @TomOrr4 debate the pros and cons of Michigan agreeing to do season 2 of All or Nothing.
I have one thing on the pro list, and it's just the lulls. I don't know if there's anything else, but I have pro the lulls. Con is no more John O'Corn, and I'm not sure how you can top last year ending on 3 straight losses.
Well, I think that's that's maybe why it's, because what I wrote down is it's a good idea in that it couldn't be any worse. And it gives you an opportunity to show that it's not always this terrible. I mean, sometimes it's not as terrible, but it would be also, then I think it would be a bad idea because there's no John O'Corn, like you said. However, I think it would be a great idea if John O'Corn has now moved in with Don Brown, because then we could start shooting Brown Thunder.
Brown Thunder, yeah. Well, that's not really all or nothing then, but I am strongly for Netflix producing Brown Thunder. If that's the question, they are welcome to take the idea. I just want to see it happen. Yeah. As for another season of All or Nothing, I mean, the schedule this year for them is not great.
No.
It's not real friendly. You open with Notre Dame. You play, I think they're at Michigan State, at Ohio State this year. Penn State at home. They're home for Wisconsin. I mean, if you're going in thinking, well, I mean, there's no way we'll lose 5 games again this year, maybe you won't. I mean, they shouldn't lose 5 games again this year, but they might very well lose 3 games this year. And I don't know if you need a second season of, here's how sad we look after we just get throttled by Penn State or Ohio State or Michigan State or whoever. I don't know if you need a second season of that out there reminding everyone what that looks like.
I think all they would have to do is be like, Amazon would be like, hey, would you guys like to do a season 2 of All or Nothing? And then Jim Harbaugh would look at the schedule and see that the game is at Ohio State, and he would be like, no, not this year. Maybe next year. Get back to us then. But yeah, this is not the schedule to do it. Although, like I said, if John O'Corn moves in with Don Brown, and then maybe at Don Brown's gated community, some crooked land barons come in and are trying to move the old people out of the area because they want to repurpose the land and sell it for, and build condos on it or some high-rise apartments and get rid of these houses that are taking up all of this room. And, they come home, Don Brown comes home from practice one day, and John O'Corn is laying out on the patio, like beaten up. And it turns out that the land baron's henchmen had roughed him up, and now they're out on the community lake. And so then, you know what that means? So
paddleboat time.
And that's when we see, like, Don Brown gets the paddle boat out, and that's when we see on the side of the paddle boat is written Brown Thunder. And that's when the music kicks in. And that's when the action gets in. And if we could get that, I wouldn't even use my sister-in-law's Amazon. I would buy my own.
Just working backwards a little bit through the script, when Don Brown walks up and sees John O'Corn lying beaten on the back patio, is his first response, was it Penn State again?
Oh, come on. We're trying to have fun here. Who did this to you? It was Penn State.
They were Penn State.
And then sometimes they would have to go out of state on a case, but like Don Brown is deathly afraid of flying, so that's when John O'Corn has to hit him over the head with a 2x4 to knock him out, and then they can put him on a plane and then go deal with the land barons over in Boston at the crab ranch that Don Brown used to have. And once again, there's some henchmen out there messing with the crab boxes and the crab pots, and so they back up the Jimmy and they put Brown Thunder into the water, and then they go deal with those toughs and make sure those crabs are okay.
As soon as you said crab ranch, I went, oh yeah, that's right, you didn't grow up anywhere near the ocean. Yeah, that's not something you typically do as a ranching operation, but you said crab pots, so you sort of redeemed yourself there, so you're all right.
Right. Ranch, farm. No big difference.
Do you want to go through a few more questions? We can kind of work our way backwards through these if you want to.
Yeah, we've got 5 minutes and 40 seconds.
All right, let's see how many we can get through. From @Sloopcast, our Ozone Radio Network brothers, favorite podcast non-sports category.
For me, it's Last Podcast on the Left, which is inappropriate, and it's true crime. It's the weird, the odd, a lot of serial killers. Not necessarily, but sometimes they talk about them. But they talk about all kinds of weird stuff, and it's funny. It's hilarious. Like they have maybe a 2 or 3 episode series on the Amityville Horror, which is hilarious, which sounds crazy, but check it out. You?
I know Jared runs the @Sloopcast account, so I know I'm supposed to say 7071 right here now, which is his new podcast about music in Columbus and around Ohio. So give that a listen. I am also a hardcore history person, which Dan Carlin releases a new episode about once every 9 months, but when he does, it's 6 hours of just magic. Radio Lab, Serial, those are all kind of the podcasting 101. Yes, you should listen to these because they're really good. The one that I will recommend to you, Gerd, and to anyone else who is an old school Simpsons fan is Four Finger Discount, which is 2 Australian guys who just go episode by episode through like the golden era of The Simpsons and review 1 episode per week. They do like an hour per episode. So that's pretty good. So that's Four Finger Discount if you're looking for that.
The hardcore history, I'm afraid to get into that because I can't listen and work because then I start listening.
Yeah. The good news is he only releases them like I said, like maybe once or twice a year. So when they come out, they're worth it. Like, especially if we're driving, like if we have a horrendous drive, I think all our drives are really reasonably short next year, but if we ever have to drive to Lincoln, Nebraska again, or Iowa City or something like that, you can pop on a hardcore history and he'll get you most of the way there. From @WVA Buckeye, what do you think the first few days after the Burrow announcement were like around the team?
For me, I don't think anybody batted an eye around the team, except the only difference would be with the quarterbacks because now there was somebody missing. But everybody else had their own jobs to do. They're doing what they normally do because they have to focus on themselves because it's such a competitive environment that if you're a receiver worrying about the quarterback, then the receiver behind you is only worried about himself and getting better. And it's just the way it is at Ohio State. Yeah, everybody's close, this and that, but you're also just focused on your job. And they always talk about in football, when somebody gets injured and they're away, like people just push them out of their minds. So I don't think, for the friends, yeah, you miss them or whatever, but nothing about your job has changed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was a huge shock to anyone that he was seriously considering that. So I think that certainly seems like that would be kind of a next man up kind of situation and move on. Wish him well, next man up, basically. From @Jason3387, give a percentage chance that Nicholas Petit-Frere takes a starting tackle spot on the offensive line.
I went 10%, and then I thought, well, no, maybe 20, and then I thought 20 is too high, so I'll go 15%. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I went under 10%. I mean, they've got 2 starters they're comfortable with there. They've got backups like Josh Alabi and Brandon Bowen is potentially a backup at tackle. I would give him a legitimate shot at potentially being a 2019 starter, maybe 30 or 40% for 2019. But yeah, I think very, very unlikely this year. P. Smith asked about the coach's projected O-line. I mean, we've kind of gone through that in the past. I think we're probably Thayer Munford, Michael Jordan, Josh Myers, or Brady Taylor at center, and Demetrius Knox and Isaiah Prince. He asked about Michael Jordan moving to center. We saw 4 different guys repping at center this spring. He was not one of them.
There's a rumor out there that Jordan they're looking at Jordan at center. So, we might talk to Urban Meyer on Friday. So that may be one of the things we ask him about.
Yeah, I mean, that I would be surprised if that happened because it seemed like they were pretty happy with both of those guys at center, but maybe they're so deep at guard they want to give them a try. But I would not expect that. But from @Zadiah, during Mike Weber's freshman year, he got caught from behind a lot. Last year, he had both burst and stamina. Can we expect the same from J.K. Dobbins? Also, does Rashad Berry stay at tight end or move to defensive end for depth?
I think we both agree that he's going to stay at tight end. I am doing a piece on this very topic on explosion and stuff like that. Looking over the numbers, like Dobbins, his percentage of 20-yard runs is higher than any of Urban Meyer's other running backs. Like last year, 8.2% of his carries went for 20 yards or more. And Ezekiel Elliott in 2014, his percentage of 20-yard carries was 5.1%. So that gives you an idea that, yeah, he's. Oh, you hear that?
I do.
But the thing to worry about or to focus on is turning those 30-yarders into 60-yarders, and that's what he has worked on. That's what Tony Alford said they're just working on the stamina, the wind. Same thing Mike Weber went through. We saw that paid dividends last year when he had, I think, 3 carries of 40 yards or more after having 4 the year before with nearly twice as many carries.
All right, so I heard your magical shows over music. So do you want to? We have a bunch of questions from Couchburner from the Ozone Forum. Do you want to skip those? I would choose to answer them because I love and respect our listeners. But I mean, I'll leave that up to you if you wanna blow off our wonderful audience and end the show right now.
Yeah, we're gonna hold those for next week. But I do appreciate the questions, and I will probably ask for more. And maybe next week it'll just all be questions. But thanks everybody for listening. We will make sure to check out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network, and check out the site, theozone.net. Check out Tom's series on all of your dreams being destroyed, about your thoughts and memories of Ohio State. Tom is ruining all of them for you because he's kind of a jerk. Tom, where can they tweet at you with their anger and disappointment?
If you'd like to tell me how I've ruined your life personally, you can tweet at me at Tom Orr 4. I will tell you that one of the 4 this week, we have a 4-part series. One of the 4 is true, so you have that to look forward to, which is nice.
All right, everybody, thanks for listening. We will talk to you next week.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say you well, now say you well. Oh yeah. Say you well, now say you well. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave